Consumers recognized that human food nutrition labels were changing, and they wanted their animal food labels to look more like the human food labels for pet food so that they could make decisions for their pets when they were choosing their food for their pets.
Hello and welcome to the Pet Food Science Podcast brought to you by Wise Genetics. I'm Jan Sokodolski. I'm here a professor at Texas A&M University, and I'm dedicated to bring you the latest insights and discussions into the pet food science industry. My guest today is Louise Calderwood. Welcome, Louise. And Louise is going to speak to us a little bit today about the new AAFCO pet food label. So welcome, Louise. And what I like to do usually is to let you introduce our guests themselves. So your career path, where did you start, where have you end up? And then we're going to talk about all the new regulations and how they're progressing. So it's all yours.
Certainly. Thank you, Jen. Well, my career path really was set by the time I was 3. If an animal had hooves, I was entranced, I was around it. By my late teen years, I discovered that dairy farmers really are the best people in the whole world and really enjoyed working with dairy cows. So that led to an advanced degree in dairy cattle reproduction. I spent 10 years as an extension agent working exclusively with dairy farmers in Vermont. And then for another 8 years, I was Vermont's Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, which in Vermont is largely dairy. 12 years as a private consultant working with all forms of agricultural businesses on business development. And now for 7 years, I've been with the American Feed Industry Association, focused on regulatory and legislative issues. And so it's really only been for the 7 years that I've broadened my career path to include pets, pet food, pet nutrition, pet food regulation.
Kemin Nutrissurance is compelled to provide safe and delicious ingredients to improve our pets' food so they can have the best quality of life. Every day, they deliver specialized expertise, innovative products, and unrivaled support through the pet food and rendering value chain. From oxidation control and food safety to palatability and nutrition, all the way through a suite of tailored services that support you from start to finish, we ensure you're getting the most from Kemin ingredients. Kemin is compelled by curiosity to ensure pets around the world are living happy and healthy lives.
That's great. So what is kind of like, okay, so you said you are from the American feed industry and you about regulation. So one quick question I always have, what is actually the AAFCO? What does the AAFCO stand for? What does it do? And how does it really relate ultimately to those new requirements for pet food labels?
Sure. And Jan, I'm going to answer that question in 2 parts. So I'm going to focus on AAFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, and AFIA, the American Feed Industry Association, because the 2 associations have been in tandem since they were each created in 1909. So the Association of American Feed Control Officials is an association of regulators. In and of itself, AAFCO is not regulatory. It was created in an attempt to bring harmonization across state lines for the definitions of feeds, of feed terms, and then ultimately to develop model regulation that states can choose to adopt for the regulation of all types of animal feed. So only regulators can be members of AAFCO. It's the Association of Feed Control Officials. In counter to AAFCO, the association of which I'm an employee, the American Feed Industry Association, was created, and that was to bring industry's balance to the table for the regulatory conversations. So we can serve on AAFCO committees in a liaison, in a technical assistance manner, but not as voting members of the committees. And so obviously we are there to represent the animal feed manufacturers, the manufacturers of the animal feed ingredients, on legislative and regulatory issues from the commercial business perspective. So the 2 associations create a balance for each other and have met together twice a year, every year since 1909, with I think one very brief pause during World War II.
So can you please describe the requirements for the new pet food labels for the modernization?
Sure. This goes back to a congressional request to the FDA. Uh, Consumers recognized that human food nutrition labels were changing, and they wanted their animal food labels to look more like the human food labels for pet food so that they could make decisions for their pets when they were choosing their food for their pets. So the request went to from FDA, well, from Congress to FDA, and then FDA to AAFCO. So in 2015, AAFCO started the work on this. And as they started to work on the modernization of pet food labels, we were right there with them every step of the way. The American Feed Industry Association, as an association, and as our member companies, were present for all of the work groups, for the focus groups, when we went out to consumers to get their input, for the development of the labels. And now we are right there with them as we work on the education piece of it for consumers, for veterinarians, for retailers, on what do these labels look like and what do they mean.
That brings me to a kind of follow-up question. How it will benefit consumers? You mentioned different stakeholders, right? Could you give us a few examples for each stakeholder, like the consumer, maybe the veterinarian, maybe the pet food industry? How would it affect?
Each of those. So I'm going to start with the consumer because that is where the request was generated for these changes. So, very shortly, consumers will see labels that look very similar to the nutrition facts box that you're used to seeing on your box of cereal in the morning, or the box of crackers that you buy. So there will be a facts box, and the calories will be shown as a common household unit, most commonly a cup, I would imagine, but it could be as a piece. So each piece will have this many calories, or each cup will have this many calories. Protein will be shown, very similar to how you see it on a human food label. So that's the biggest change that consumers will recognize. A change from crude fiber to dietary fiber, a front of the package change, which many companies already employ, but this will now be a requirement, that the intended use for the product will have to be clearly displayed on the lower third of the front of the package. So, a complete diet for adult dogs, supplemental feeding for kittens. This will be very clearly shown on the front of the label. Some of the other changes is that vitamins can appear as both their common name that a consumer will recognize, as well as the scientific name. Uh, so those are some of the most profound changes that a consumer will notice. So that's how it's going to benefit consumers. How will that benefit veterinarians? Well, was it 60% of our household pets are obese in the United States, I believe. So this will help veterinarians as they work with their clients for choosing the right food for their pets. Is that you will be able to see the kilocalories per cup, as well as the cups per size animal, for example, that's suggested for feeding, so that you can now compare diets based on those kilocalories per household unit. So extremely useful for veterinarians in this manner.
Great. So what is the progress at the moment? Where are pet food manufacturers? And maybe just take a step back. When is kind of the timeline? What is the timeline of implementing those pet food labels?
Sure. The timeline started with the publication of the changes in the official publication of AAFCO. This is our Bible in the animal food industry. And so the modernized label requirements were published in February of 2024, and that was the start of the timeline. Companies have 5 years to come into compliance. And as we get towards the end of that timeline, if companies still need more time, AAFCO is willing to revisit that for a total of 6 years. So it could be as late as 2030 before all of the companies have switched over to this. So that is one timeline, is the regulatory timeline set by AAFCO, which again states can choose to adopt, but it's been recommended as a timeline by AAFCO. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that states need to have changes. Almost every state will need to change their statute to adopt these. There are some states that adopt the OP automatically, but most states will have to change their statutes. And even those that don't, they will still need to update their regulations. So it's going to take states a number of years as well to make these regulatory changes. Our indication from most of the states is that if a company moves forward ahead of a state, so let's say a company is ready to update their labels, but the state hasn't made the required statutory changes, that most states have indicated that they're willing to apply discretion on this and to recognize the modernized new labels, which is absolutely essential for consumers. So we appreciate that, and we highly suggest to states that they do have that regulatory discretion and adopt the new or recognize the new labels. A couple things that will need to change. We just need the manpower and the bandwidth. Think about this. Every label on every pet food, treat, and supplement needs to be changed. So the artwork that needs to be done for this, the physical printing, creating the new templates, the new plates for the printing, all of this is going to take time. Uh, and then another piece that will take time is that change from crude fiber to dietary fiber. So this will now change the lab requirements for measuring those fibers. And that is another thing, not only from the industry side, the lab capacity, but also for the states to have the regulatory capacity on their side to be able to measure dietary fiber rather than crude fiber. So those are some of the pieces that we see that are requiring that very extended timeline for adoption.
So, what do you see as the biggest challenges at the moment in the transition? You mentioned a little bit, obviously, the fiber, some of the labeling. Are there other challenges that companies should be aware of? Maybe the consumer should be aware of?
Yeah, the greatest challenge that we are seeing right now is the state's ability to adopt these. And we understand states have other regulatory issues that they need to deal with during the legislative process. But that to us is the greatest challenge at the moment is the timeline by the states for adoption.
So, which states are? Do you have like a feeling which states already are? Some states already have it done already, or are they still?
We do have a handful of states that adopt by reference. As soon as the OP is updated, they are updated, but that's only 3 states. So, and I'm sorry, I should be able to name those right off the top of my head, and of course, now it's eluding me. But it's a very small number of states that adopt by reference to the OP. We do know a few other states. Washington State is out in the lead on this. I believe Minnesota is in the lead on working this through their legislative process.
What's on the other side, on the downside, if a company is not compliant but they have a timeline? What are the consequences going to be?
That will be state by state again. So most states work with the regulated industry. They don't want to exclude choice for their consumers in that state. So they don't want to shut a company out of the state. So most states are going to work with a company to come into compliance, to give them a timeline, to give them the space that they need. And that's why the 5 years is in place. We understand this is a real economic hit to develop the new packaging labels, to print the new packaging. And states have been willing to give companies the time they need to use up existing packaging to plan budgets for the new artwork and the new label design.
I mean, I would assume that most companies or many companies sell probably across all the states, right? So how do they navigate this whole little jungle at the moment?
It is a bit of a jungle. That's a good term there. Yes.
Okay, so that answers the question, I guess.
Yes. And that remember, that's why AFIA was created, was to help carve the path through the jungle.
Okay, great. So what is if you would now, for example, let's say a company, I would assume most companies have started, right? Or you think some companies are still in the planning process? If they are in the planning process, what would you recommend? How would they approach this?
Yes, most companies are in the planning process,
Okay.
actually, and that's across all sizes of companies. It's not just big companies or little companies. Most of the companies are still in the planning process. I would advise a company to start now.
Okay.
At least get it written into the budget for the required changes to the artwork so that if you need to implement it, over a number of years, at least you're looking forward. As I said, just access to the graphic design work and to the physical creation of the printing plates is something that companies need to plan for. So if a company hasn't started now, my advice to them would be probably before the end of the year. You want to start having your timeline developed for implementation.
And what would be practical advices that you would give a company, or are there any consulting or possibilities, or how would you recommend them they would approach this? Can they do it by themselves, or is it really very useful to have to work with somebody?
Oh, yes. Some companies will strictly be doing this in-house. Absolutely. On the dietary fiber, there are commercial labs that can work to do that testing for them. But some of the commercial labs have indicated to us that we haven't had a lot of requests yet, and we are concerned about a backlog. So certainly identify your commercial lab. I think another piece that we should focus on, certainly the manufacturers, that's my world. But I think we should also focus on the veterinarians and the retailers and what they can do to prepare for this. And so within AAFCO, uh, educational material is being developed. And it's being developed. A lot has been developed for the manufacturers. We are working with AAFCO on this. AFIA is, and we're just wrapping up the educational material for small manufacturers. So manufacturers, small manufacturers, educational material has been developed for retailers. So point of sale material to educate their staffing, that is being developed, and also educational components for veterinarians as they are working with their clients. So AFCO has taken the leadership with AFIA and our member companies right there with them, developing these educational materials, which are available at afco.org. All of this educational material, all of the information around pet food label modernization is available to the public on the AFCO website.
No, that's very good information, because I could see that there's some confusion during the transition, right? If some labels are starting to be changed and other ones are still the old one. So when do you expect the first labels to kind of appear in the in on the packages?
Yeah, I do know that some of our member companies have distributed the new design for their label to states for review. They have gotten feedback from states on this. I know that a few of our member companies are ready. They've been prepping for this for over a year now and would like to have this rolled out. As far as an actual time frame, I don't know, but I would certainly expect within the next year we will start to see these on shelves.
You said the states give them feedback. Is there some common, you know, potential issues that have been as a feedback, or is it usually a straightforward process?
It is generally straightforward. You understand these regulations have to do with font size. If you have so many square inches on a package, the font size has to be this. And that's the feedback that our members have received so far. Are things such as eighth of an inch differences on font size, not the material information that a consumer needs.
Great. But I guess this information, exactly how to print it and so on, is all available through.
Yes.
It's time for our famous three. A longer, healthier lifespan for our pets. That is EW Nutrition's target. With immunoglobulins, that target is within reach. IGY are a young generation technology platform, an innovative solution that has been tried and tested over the last decades and can now yield tangible benefits. Immunoglobulins from egg yolk improve the animal's response to pathogens in the gut or in the mouth. They're easy to administer, they're perfectly safe, and they just work. Made with passion, proven with science.
So we have a few more minutes, and I'll just maybe Is there something else that you think it's important about the pet food label? Because before I come back to like a question I just had for some why has it been changed, but do you think it's important
I'm
too?
happy to roll where you'd like to take your next question.
Okay, so there's some more. That's more like a maybe a partly scientific question. So you mentioned the fiber is going to be a very critical part, right? So it's going to be companies gonna have to probably invest, right? That means they're gonna spend have money for new analysis. Why is this fiber change so important? What is the benefits that we know now? Also the total fiber and the crude fiber, and not just like before. So why is this so important step?
Sure. Yeah, I'm speaking to a veterinarian here directly, and I'm certain many veterinarians in the audience and researchers, and that is just our exploding understanding of the importance of the microbiome and the role of fiber in the health of the digestive tract and therefore the health of the entire animal. And as that knowledge base just continues to grow at a logarithmic manner, we recognize the need of that. And it's for things as simple as stool quality, something that a pet caretaker is going to recognize on a daily basis, but also the subtle changes on everything from cognition to joint health to ability to withstand stress and address disease issues. We understand the role of that. So certainly, dietary fiber is a important component in helping to assess the fiber content, which is a base for that gut health in the animal.
And so that's why this is now such an important piece of information that it is needed to really expand. So why is before was crudes and now we want to have the total dietary fiber? So what is kind of the difference there?
It goes back historically to what was available in the way of testing and what was important from the perspective of livestock, which is certainly where animal feed started was livestock. And the crude fiber 100 years ago was a valuable number to have. Our understanding of the role of fiber has changed, and it's time to update the pet food labels to show this.
Okay, great. And so you say again, just to reiterate that this is probably the most a potential bottleneck, right? Because pretty much all the food has to gonna be through new testing.
Yes, I think the major bottleneck is adoption by individual states. That I see.
Okay.
But we do understand that the ability to test for dietary fiber rather than crude fiber is something both from the regulator side and the manufacturer side that they are seeing as an issue.
So I think we are at the end. So that was very informative. Thank you so much. There's going to be a lot of changes. So I will thank you so much for being here. And if there's anything else that you think is very, very important, I'll give you one more chance.
Just one other thing beyond this is regulatory changes at the federal level, where
Okay.
we're hoping that we'll be able to make actual claims on labels for the benefits of some of the ingredients in pet foods. And boy, that could be a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day.
You're more than welcome to come back. Great. So thank you so much. So with this, we're concluding another episode of the Pet Food Science Podcast presented to you by Wisenetics. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Louise Calderwood, for telling us all the newest updates on the requirements for pet food labels. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on new future episodes. Until next time, this is Jan Sugodolski from the Pet Food Science Podcast signing off. Bye-bye.